Great, thank you, John. So today we're going to talk about archiving and eDiscovery, specifically related to the healthcare industry and what some of the challenges are and what some of the solutions are that are available. Just a quick agenda. What we're going to go over today are first are some of the information governance challenges in healthcare and some of the issues surrounding that, especially ones that we've seen with healthcare organizations that we've had as customers. A lot of issues across the industry. Second, how we can help, how Bluesource can help address those challenges, what some of the solutions are, and then we're actually going to go through 3 specific scenarios, the largest issues that we see time and again, and how to solve those issues, and then what it would look like to deploy those solutions, and there's some options there that we'll go over. And then finally, we'll have some time for some Q&A. And as Jen said, feel free to use the chat window to send questions along, and I will answer them as best as I can. And so let's get started. So the information governance challenge, there's a lot of things that can fall under information governance, but just a few of the things. The largest one would be an exponential growth of data. Next year, organizations will create 39% more data than this year. And that is an explosive growth. And actually, Veritas, which is a large partner of ours, they provide a calculator on their website. You can put in some information about your organization, how much data you currently have, and also the industry that you're in. And there are some calculations that they can perform on what your costs look like as far as your data volume, and it's very helpful to go through that. The problem with all of this data, of course, is the limited insight to it in terms of what kind of value it has. And on average, 52% of a company's data is what we consider dark, which means that there's really no value that's actually being assigned to it. And because of that, you don't have a good handle on what it is that you have. And so usually the default action to that is just to leave it where it is and hope that it'll be deleted someday. The other issue, of course, especially in healthcare, is that regulated data can actually be held outside of regulated systems sometimes. We all have, of course, issues with PSTs. A lot of organizations do. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then, of course, sprawling file shares. Pretty much every organization, healthcare or otherwise, that we talk to has an issue with sprawling file share data, getting a handle on that data, figuring out what it is you have. And then, of course, retention and disposition. This is a large issue, not just for healthcare, but a lot of organizations, about what it is that you need to keep and for how long. And then, are you actually deleting that data when it reaches its retention? Are you keeping it forever? And what kind of exposure and risk does that cause for your organization? And then finally, how do you deal with changing laws and regulations? These things can obviously change as they have in the recent past. How do you account for these changes? How do you implement them? So those are some of the challenges that we see across the board with healthcare organizations. And so why don't we get into how we can address some of those, and specifically how archiving and eDiscovery tools that we can provide address those challenges. So first off, we have a couple of products, Veritas Data Insight, as well as Enterprise Vault. And those 2 products together allow you to do a number of things. First, you can find information across multiple platforms. So we support a lot of different filers, file shares, things like that, SharePoint, Box, and then of course all of the email platforms, Exchange, Domino, Office 365, and anything over SMTP. So I think a lot of the information that can go across a lot of these platforms, they're all kind of siloed. And the other thing that they often don't provide in a clear way is identity and ownership. So how do we identify the true owners of data, who's actually the custodian, and who's actually responsible for that data? Indexing and OCR. So indexing what it is that you actually have in those files, being able to search through that content and get to more than just the metadata. And then OCR goes along with that, optical character recognition, We'll talk a little bit about that later, but that is essentially taking anything that's been scanned, which is a huge issue, scanned images, pictures with text in it, screenshots of applications, or screenshots of medical data. Those are all things that can be OCR'd and have their text indexed. We can also classify based on content or metadata. We'll get a little bit into that as well a little later. And you can optimize storage across all of these different platforms. So deduplication is a huge advantage, and the duplication of data is an issue that we see time and again across our organizations. You have files that have been emailed, those same files are sitting on file shares or inside of SharePoint, and they're taking up way more space than they need to. And so these platforms can actually optimize and single instance that storage across multiple different platforms. And we can apply retention and disposition policies to that data. So we can decide how long to keep that data based on what it is, and we can enforce the destruction of that data when it becomes necessary, and it does so in a legally defensible way. The other side of this would be the discovery side, and we have a platform for that from Veritas as well. Provides full eDiscovery reference model support, straight from identification and legal hold all the way through collections, analysis, processing, review, and production. With Enterprise Vault, you can issue in-place hold. So again, we're trying to manage data in place where it sits in the archiving platform rather than collecting a whole bunch of data and placing it in an area, again, that we have to assign storage to. You can also collect from other platforms like Exchange and Office 365 and Domino and SharePoint directly. And it provides rich analytics for all of that. And then, of course, like I said, full EDRM support. So those are some of the solutions that we offer from the Veritas side. And you might be wondering, well, what about Office 365? A lot of organizations, including healthcare organizations, are looking at Office 365 to manage their email and SharePoint workloads, as well as Skype for Business and the other workloads that are available in Office 365. Well, the good news is that we can help you with that as well. From an information governance perspective, there's a number of different tools within Office 365 that help you govern information in those various workloads. There's retention tags and retention policies and labels, and they can be a bit confusing. And so one of the things that we can do is actually work up a retention policy and a information governance strategy and tell you how to leverage those tools and actually implement those policies and tools to help you actually put that information governance strategy into practice. There's also an eDiscovery component as well. You can issue in-place holds, so you can search and export the data. And of course, you can run through analytics with the advanced eDiscovery. And we are one of 18 high-touch eDiscovery partners with Microsoft. And so we have deep experience in this area, including the relevance aspect with predictive coding. So all of these tools within Office 365, if you're currently there or you're looking at Office 365, we can help you manage the information governance challenges both in O365 as well as on-prem. So let's get into some specific challenges that you may have. And again, we see these time and again. The first one, of course, with healthcare, we always talk about HIPAA. And obviously, medical records should be stored in appropriate systems to handle that. So everyone talks about HIPAA with respect to information governance in healthcare, but everyone assumes that those medical records are actually in those systems. Are they really? And one of the things that we can do is actually kind of verify what information you have and where it exists. And we can help you find that information on non-regulated systems and take appropriate action on it. Obviously, the vast majority of any information that is subject to HIPAA is in an appropriate system to manage that. However, some organizations have specific file shares where data may be kept, scanned documents, especially filers and copy machines within offices can store scanned documents on file shares. Is that information subject to HIPAA? And if so, does it need to be placed in an appropriate system? So once you've kind of identified that, we can talk about everything else. And it's not just HIPAA for information, it's confidential documents, intellectual property. Organizations of all types have these types of documents in their organization, on their filers, in their email, and their SharePoint sites. And then, of course, with email, things like autoresponders, ticket emails, bulk emails from internal and external parties that don't need to be included in archives. You may have credit card information that's floating around in emails or scanned faxes or things like that. And then, of course, contracts. And all of these different types of data can be classified. And knowing what you have and knowing where these documents exist, they all have different actions that they need to have on them, whether they be archived immediately, whether they be expunged like PCI data, whether they can be dropped or have a very short retention period on them like autoresponders, or whether they need to be kept for 7 or 10 years like contracts. Knowing these where these documents are and being able to take certain actions on them is super important. And not knowing about any of these documents causes a lot of issues. The first one is ROT, or redundant, outdated, or trivial information. Leaving these documents where they are and not really knowing what they are can cause you to just leave them there forever, and they tend to just sit. And that can obviously cause a lot of issues, storage sprawl being one of them, as well as increased risk, because now you're not expiring that data when it should be. So one of the things that we can do is classification. Anything that we can ingest into the archive can be classified. So exchange information, domino emails, files from file servers, PSTs, and NSFs, which we'll talk about in a minute, SharePoint data, and any of the information that you can ingest through third-party connectors. So there are a ton of connectors that you can use to get various content into the archives, such as social media connectors. There's ones for collaboration platforms, instant messages, lots of different tools and workloads can be archived as well. And all of that information can be classified from policies that you define. So you can decide if an item should be archived or discarded. For example, autoresponders, chances are they don't need to be responded to or archived or discovered, so they can be dropped. You can assign retention based on both the metadata or the content. So for example, if the file that's been archived has a contract identifier on it, you can assign it a retention category based on contracts, and it's kept for 7 years. If it has items, for example, credit card data in it, you can tag that to be reviewed, or you can prevent it from being archived in the first place and expunge it. You can assign searchable tags so that if you are doing eDiscovery or supervision of emails or files, you can actually tag those and make them easier for those people to find. And you can reclassify all of this data if the policy, laws, or regulations change that they're subject to. So a good example would be if you are currently regulated to keep data for 5 years, and then 3 years into that, it changes to 7 years. You can actually reclassify that data and keep it for 7 years, and it's very easy to do that. And so in a lot of other systems, you actually have to take that message or file out and then bring it back in a very manual and labor-intensive process in order to reclassify that data. So by doing the reclassification using the engine that's in Enterprise Vault, you're able to easily classify and reclassify that data. The other thing that's available along that is something called gated deletion. So if you're uncomfortable about actually having files being deleted, we can actually do a last-minute check to see if that file being deleted is being deleted under current policies. And so if for some reason that policy changed since the time that item was archived, you can actually do a last-minute check and make sure that it's being deleted under current policies. The next issue is data rot, as I mentioned, which is redundant, outdated, or trivial information. It's stuff that really has no business value. And so one of the symptoms of this is that you keep everything forever. And this really increases your exposure and your risk because you're keeping documents that you don't really need to keep. And so if you have it, you have to produce it in a legal manner if you have an investigation or a subpoena. And so not knowing what you have and what value it has causes you to keep things forever. The other thing as well is the information governance management aspect of it. Do you know who is responsible for various data stores and who's responsible for maintaining that? Specific use case of this would be departmental file shares. Pretty much every organization we talk to has departmental file shares. They have tons of documents in them. They are, a lot of them are authored by folks that have left the organization, and quite a bit of it is extremely old. And a lot of it simply doesn't have any business value anymore, whether it's just outdated or it was stuff that didn't have a business value to begin with and has just remained there. So one of the things we can do to address this would be to identify true ownership of data. And when I say true ownership, we can actually identify owners based on usage profiles, not just the owner of the file on the file properties itself. So if someone is constantly modifying or reading or using a file, we can place an ownership based on that instead of just strict permissions. So we can identify files based on activities such as when were files created, what's actually being modified and being used and changed, which files are being most frequently accessed. And you can also be alerted to information dumps. So we can establish an activity baseline, and then if someone were to start copying a whole bunch of files at once that went way outside their normal usage profile, we can actually set up alerts for that. The other thing we can do is archive those files to Enterprise Vault. So a lot of the things that we end up finding, extremely old data, what we can do is say anything that hasn't been accessed in the last year, send it off to Enterprise Vault, and we can actually push classification tags to it. We can identify and index that content. And finally, we can apply retention so that it has a life cycle. The data is going from one place to another, cheaper storage. We're identifying it. We're seeing what it is, indexing its content. We put a retention period on it. And then finally, we actually enforce the deletion when that retention has expired. So the whole idea here is that we're identifying what you have, classifying it, figuring out what it is, and how long it needs to be kept, keeping it for that length of time, and then enforcing an actual disposition. So the third challenge that we're seeing a lot, and we did this for a healthcare organization of about 80,000 seats. They had PSTs everywhere, and they are an information governance nightmare. You have a lot of content in a single file, or sometimes you have 2 or 3 files for an individual, and they all contain lots and lots of emails and data. They're highly portable. Like I said, they're single files in most cases, and they can be moved around and copied from file share to removable drives to different laptops and desktops, and they're nearly impossible to regulate because of that. So because of all of these things, they really pose a significant eDiscovery challenge in that they contain data that the organization technically owns, but may not have easy access to. They tend to be mobile in that they leave regulated environments. They tend to be put on thumb drives, and since they can only be accessed from one computer at a time. So it's a huge, huge challenge. So what we do is provide a full PST migration service. We identify, collect, and migrate those PSTs to the archive or Office 365, depending on your needs. We can filter out content for either sensitive or irrelevant data. We can filter out content based on a date range or custodian. And we can provide full communication to end users, so they know exactly what's going on and what they need to do during the entire process. So for the healthcare organization I mentioned, there are about 80,000 seats, so there were several steps involved, and communication was sent to the users at every different step. And we effectively eliminated PSTs in their organization. We took all of their information, we migrated it into Enterprise Vault. We eliminated PSTs from their file shares and from their desktops and laptops, and we prevented their further use through policies that we helped the organization push out. So this was a significant undertaking, and what it allowed the hospital to do was get a handle on all the information that they had. And also it was a much better user experience for their employees because they were able to go to one location for all of their information instead of having to worry about PSTs and what their quotas were and where their information was sitting. And then of course the organization itself was able to gain access in a single location to all of this information that was, previously scattered and very decentralized. So it was really a mutually beneficial operation. So what do these solutions look like? How are they deployed? Well, first, we can of course deploy on premises, and we've got the Enterprise Vault platform, which covers archiving. We have Data Insight, which covers governance and intelligence and some other things as well. And then we have the eDiscovery platform, which covers the entire legal workflow. We can have all of these products deployed on-prem, and they can be managed by yourself, or we can manage them for you with a Bluesource managed service, and I'll go into a little bit on that in just a minute. We can also deploy these products into the Azure cloud. So a lot of organizations are on a cloud-first, mobile-first platform, and so we can deploy all of these to the Azure cloud. Again, we can have you manage it, or we can manage it for you. And then finally, we can do a hybrid model. And this gets kind of interesting because some of these products can be left on premises depending on your requirements, and some of them can be moved to Azure. In the case of Enterprise Vault, there's a lot of flexibility. You can have the Enterprise Vault archiving platform on-prem, and then you can actually have it storing all of its data in either Amazon S3 or Microsoft Azure storage for that hybrid model. And the same with Data Insight and the eDiscovery platform. You can have those on-prem or in cloud, or a combination of the two. And then again, you can have your team manage those applications, or we can manage it as well. So those are the deployment options, very flexible, and based on your requirements and needs, we can talk about that further, what it might look like. Just a few highlights about the managed service. For all of these applications, we provide real-time monitoring and fault remediation 24/7. So we have been a Veritas Platinum partner, and we have been working with Enterprise Vault and since its inception, so about 16 years now. And then of course with the Veritas eDiscovery platform and Data Insight as well. And we provide upgrades and patches. So one major version upgrade per year. We have unlimited patches and hotfixes. And the good thing is we work with your change control process to implement these. So unlike other SaaS solutions in the cloud, we don't just roll out changes when we feel like it. We actually work with your change control process, identify what patches are relevant to your organization, what new features are in each one, and we come to a mutual agreement on which patches and hotfixes and upgrades need to occur. For the cloud operations, we have complete infrastructure management, so all of the storage and databases and operating system and patching, they're all managed for you. So you don't have to worry about provisioning any storage. The operational costs are the model that you go with, and you don't have to lay out any capital expenses for storage footprint. You don't have to have a database team managing those databases that those applications use. We do that for you. And then, of course, the servers that run the applications don't need to be managed or patched by your team as well. So all of that is handled in the managed service. So that concludes my presentation on this. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take those now. So looks like we've got something in the chat window. So to protect any email that may be potentially involved in future litigation, can Bluesource's solution flag an archived item or an entire email account to protect it from any deletion or actions until the hold is removed? Absolutely. So the Veritas eDiscovery platform can facilitate that. It has a direct integration to Enterprise Vault. So if you get hit with a legal matter or an internal investigation, anything like that, you can put specific files and emails on hold, or you can put entire, all of the content for specific participant, you can put that on hold as well. Likewise, in Office 365, you can do the same thing. You can identify files and SharePoint documents and emails that belong to a specific individual, or you can base it off of keywords and date ranges and things like that. But in both platforms, they can be placed on hold where they sit. Okay, any other questions? If I own Enterprise Vault or eDiscovery platform on-prem, how can I take advantage of the managed service in the cloud? Great question. So we can actually move those environments to the Azure cloud, depending on what kind of storage you're using and the content you're archiving. We have a couple of different ways that we move those applications up to the cloud. But the good news is that you can keep your existing licensing and all of your data and policies remain intact. And then, of course, all of your casework in the eDiscovery platform remain intact as well. So what we do is typically a professional services operation to move those environments into the Azure cloud. And then once they're up there, we move into a managed service phase and we take over management of those applications. Another question, is there a searchable audit trail of all administrators and users that have permission to search the archive, enabling you to have record of all activity? Yes, there is a permissions report that you can run. Typically, in most situations, the searching and eDiscovery operations are obfuscated to the eDiscovery platform. So you'll have named accounts that will be logging in there. All the activity is logged. So any kind of collection activity, legal hold activity, searches, tagging, production, redaction, all of those activities are logged and defensible. Does this give end users the ability to search, forward, print, restore messages, access, search, and view messages in their original context without administrator support? Yes, absolutely. So there's an integrated search that's available. So, for example, if you have file shares that folks have access to, and those files are archived, they can get access to them directly through the folder that they were in. They can just double click on the file and it will pull it back. So generally the user interface for files that have been archived is strictly, what they've been used to. They just double click on a file in Windows Explorer, it will bring it back. There is also a search interface where they can go and search across all of the files they have available from an end user perspective, and then email as well. And obviously, any kind of eDiscovery journal, that wouldn't be provided to end users, but the eDiscovery tools will provide access to litigation teams for that for those records. Can exported data be redacted, ensuring that personal information or other redacted items do not become part of the open records request? Yes, the eDiscovery platform provides full redaction tools, so you can take out the Sharpie and drag across documents. You can search for text and redact it. You can automatically redact privacy information, social security numbers, entire pages. So yes, full redaction tools are available. And once those items are produced, they are burned in as TIFFs or PDFs. Okay. I don't see any other questions. So at this point, I will turn it back over to Jen.
Well, thank you everyone for attending today. If you'd like a copy of the slides or a recording of today's webinar, reach out to me. You should all have my email address. And we'll follow up with you in the next few days, see if you have any additional questions. In the meantime, have a great day, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Austin. Bye, everyone.
Bye.